You're watching Mugen TV RPG Haven. Experience a fantasy like no other.
Now that the Final Fantasy VII Remake has officially released, many players and YouTubers are giving their overall thoughts and what they feel about the entire game. I did mention before that I would not reveal the game until a week later. I wanted to give myself enough time to allow the game to actually sink in and not respond off of my initial impulse. I completed the game 2 days ago, and during that time, I sat back to really take in what I experienced with the game. For the most part, I really enjoyed the game. 98% of it was really solid in terms of gameplay, visuals, level design, dialogue, and etc. But then, the last and final chapter of the game took everything I loved about Final Fantasy VII original story and flipped it on its head. The last hour of the game went completely left field and tempered my expectations for part 2 of this episodic journey. I felt somehow misled by the developers when they said that they wanted to maintain the essence of Final Fantasy VII while expanding its story and making some needed changes for a newer audience. But they went beyond small changes. They literally changed the core fabric of Final Fantasy VII original story to the point it's no longer the same game, but it's a completely new Final Fantasy VII altogether. And because of that, nothing is off the table in terms of completely overhauling the entire lore of Final Fantasy VII. But for me to go into further detail, I must warn you that spoilers will be throughout the entire video. I uploaded a non-spoiler review for those who are interested in hearing my thoughts of the overall game. Click on the card above or wait till the end of the video for the end screen to display the video. Before we get into the discussion, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. So, oh boy, where should I begin? There's so much to unpack here, but I guess we can talk about the final chapter and then work our way backwards. I also want to say that my opinion on how I feel about the game shouldn't affect how you feel about the game. This is an attack on your experience. I want to make that clear because some fans tend to get defensive and start attacking by throwing insults and not have a constructive conversation on a topic they feel so passionate about. Now that that's out of the way, let's get right into this. So, Chapter 18 is the final chapter of Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is where the game decided to take a U-turn in the story department for no complete reason whatsoever. After completing the iconic motorcycle chase scene, Cloud and his party is greeted by Sephiroth. Meanwhile, the Arbiters of Fate appears, surrounding the Shinra building, making sure certain people don't leave while removing other characters from the scene. But I guess in order for me to get into the deeper meaning into the game's last hour, I must explain these Arbiters of Fate first. So, from my understanding, these Arbiters of Fate are somewhat the will of the planet, making sure that its destiny is preserved by preventing Cloud and the others from straying away from a set path that is destined for them. This is clarified by Red 13 himself when the party were discussing the matter in the Shinra's lab facility. Knowing that, Cloud and his party decided that fate shouldn't define who they are in their future. So in typical fashion, Cloud and crew decides that they will defy destiny by defeating fate itself. Now, if you are a fan of the original, you will probably be saying to yourself, what the hell does fate and destiny have to do with the core essence of Final Fantasy VII lore? Well, your guess is as good as mine. In order for Cloud and the others to stray off the path that is destined for them, they would have to cross into a realm that I call the Realm of Destiny and defeat the physical embodiment of fate itself. I know some of you are beginning to see some Kingdom Hearts similarities here, and you aren't wrong because this is pulled right out of Kingdom Hearts playbook. The big Arbiter manifestation looks just like a giant Heartless if you ask me. This has Tetsuya Nomura's hands all over it, but I digress. So the fate that Cloud and the others are trying to defy, what is it? So this is where my head begins to spin, because the giant manifestation of fate summons 3 Arbiters of Destiny from the future to stop Cloud and the others from defying their fate. Each of the 3 Arbiters have distinct characteristics that if you may have ignored during this intense battle. You have a sword-wielding Arbiter, a fist-swinging Arbiter, and a gun-holding Arbiter. Some discovered that if you use the assess material like I did, if you read the description, it describes each Arbiter. And it pretty much states that these are the warriors from a distant future who had pretty much took on this form in order to prevent you from escaping fate. So, This is where the kicker comes into place. Upon defeating each arbiter, Cloud and the others are giving images of a destined future. Now, this destined future is, that's right, you guessed it, events from the original Final Fantasy VII game. But Arif explains that it's actually a dark future if they fail to stop Sephiroth. So somehow the developers is now telling us that the original game events is a bad timeline. I went completely silent and downright confused upon watching and hearing what was said to me as a fan of the original game. So what Cloud and the others do is down there trying to prevent these events from the original game from happening. By doing that, they first must defeat Fate and Destiny itself. So after defeating the manifestation of Fate itself, Sephiroth himself appears, and we are introduced to a cool but concerning cinematic of Cloud and the others taking on Sephiroth. This felt all wrong to me because why are we fighting Sephiroth this early into the first of multiple games to come? If you, the player, fight Sephiroth now, then what's the point of fighting him at the end of the game? The original game had established set pieces that gradually built up anticipation of the final climactic fight between Cloud and Sephiroth. What really bothered me was the fact is that after defeating him, Cloud and Sephiroth are sent to the realm of creation to have their last encounter, and they literally rip the exact camera angles as the original game's final fight scene, but this time it plays out much differently. Cloud doesn't win, but he doesn't lose either. Sephiroth treats Cloud more like a homie trying to convince him to do some effed up stuff that will only eventually benefit him in the long run. Sephiroth wants Cloud to help him defy fate together. So does this imply that Sephiroth somehow knows that he's going to get his ass kicked in the future and doesn't want that to happen? Oh no. So it just get better from here, because at the end we are greeted to another old friend. Yeah, that's right. We are introduced to Zack this early into the game. He's standing on top of the iconic cliff in which he was killed by Shinra officers in the original game in Crisis Core. But this time, things are a bit different. The Arbiters of Fate are surrounding the Shinra building. So what does this mean? Not only is the Arbiters of Fate is in the present time, they are somehow in the past too, but why? If you are a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, then you know who Zack is, and why is he important to the foundation of the Final Fantasy VII lore. But if you are new to the game, then you will be most definitely confused and ask questions like, who the F is that? Why does he look like Cloud? This is right out of the Kingdom Hearts playbook. Kingdom Hearts tend to always throw new plot threads and introduce new characters with no real context behind it, which oftentimes draws more questions than answers, so I can see new players getting confused by the sudden appearance of Zack. After that, we finally reached the true conclusion of this game, where Cloud and the others are standing on the exact cliff where Zack and Cloud once stood. They are looking over at Midgar and they realize that their work is not over and Sephiroth and Shinra must be stopped. Then we are greeted with another surprising turn of events. We see Zack and Cloud from the past walking through Arif and Cloud, which could imply many different meanings. Some believe that Zack is now alive and exists in an alternate timeline, but I don't stand by that just yet. He could very well still be dead. I just don't understand the reasoning behind this scene at all. Then the game concludes stating that an unknown journey awaits. Now, that sentence alone leaves me concerned for the future of this remake entirely. Why? Think about it. You as a player has defeated the manifestation of fate itself, meaning that Cloud and the others are no longer bound to the events of the original events of Final Fantasy VII story, which means Kitase and Nomura has free reign to do whatever they want in terms of changing the overall theme and lore of the original. Nothing is off the table going forward. We were giving hints throughout the entire game. I almost forgot to mention that Biggs is no longer dead and very much alive. Wedge is still alive as well. Fans are speculating whether or not Jesse's still alive or not, but that's debatable. So what is to stop them from not killing Arif but instead kill Tifa? Hell, what is it to stop them from breaking Zack to life by introducing this fate, destiny, and time plot device? What if Sephiroth isn't the main antagonist by the end of the game? What if Sephiroth is giving a redemption arc and ends up joining Cloud and the others to stop a much greater evil? Let's not say that I am reaching here, because nothing is off the table at this point. The ending has caused so much divide between the fan base to the point that some people feel deceived by Kitase and Nomura. There are some people who say, well, if you want the original story, then play the original. And there's others who say, well, who wants to play a one-to-one playthrough but with better graphics? That isn't the point. This remake wouldn't exist if the fans of the original weren't asking for it throughout the years. You would think they would respect the source material and its fans by maintaining what was great about the original while expanding on ideals that were already present. Expanding the lore and changing the lore are two different concepts. The game did so well expanding on ideas that weren't present in the original. Adding depth to Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse were beautiful. Adding to their character didn't change the core story, but it added new information to characters while staying true to who they are. How about Chapter 9? The Honeybee Inn in the original game was optional content and wasn't really important to the main story. What was important to the story was the fact is that Cloud and Arif had to find a way to save Tifa from Don Corneo's mansion. You had to do so by doing odd jobs for certain NPCs in order to get a dress from the clothing store, and then you had to head over to the gym and do a squat challenge in order to get the wig. Those were the only necessary things needed to move the story forward, and the rest was optional. Having Don Corneo choose Cloud in the original required optional questing, but not essential to move the plot forward. But in the remake, they were able to add in Sam, Andrea, and Madam M into the story. Sam tricked Cloud and Arif in a toss coin that wouldn't grant them access to the Don Corneo contest. As a result, you had to get the attention of Madam M, who provided the clothing for Arif. But by doing so, you had to complete a few challenges at the arena. This also sparked interest in Andrea to help Cloud receive a makeover. So the remake was able to incorporate the Honeybee Inn as a plot element to expand the game's lore. It didn't change anything from the original lore. All it did was add in new characters while still pushing the story forward originally, but in a different way. This has also allowed them to introduce another new character named Leslie, who I thought was another interesting character. He adds to the story but doesn't change the overall core elements of the lore. So what I'm saying is the original story will be a fresh experience for new players who never played the original game, while adding to the lore with the examples I just mentioned will make the original story feel fresh to fans of the original Final Fantasy VII game. So it's not exactly one-to-one, but still keeps the core elements intact. So, what are the core themes and elements of Final Fantasy VII? Some may have different interpretations of what they are, but I think for the most part, most of us agree that the theme of the original Final Fantasy was dealing with loss and moving forward with that loss. The other is reestablishing self-identity. So let's dive into this for a bit. The producer himself said in an interview, if you had bought Final Fantasy Advent Children DVD, he said the core idea that made him come up with the concept of the live stream was the fact that he had experienced a loss of a loved one, and that's what pretty much set up the foundation for the overall theme of Final Fantasy VII. And love itself was also an establishment piece to not only create memorable moments in gaming history, but it also was important to character growth and development. So the remakes take some of the most important set pieces and flipped it on its head, and overall it changes the game entirely. So what are some of these set pieces? For example, Zack's death, Arif's sacrifice, Sephiroth's reunion. Most of the characters in the game experiences loss in some way or another. But most importantly, Zack's death is essential to the overall plot of Final Fantasy VII. His death sets up everything for the main game. Zack's death is the reason behind Cloud's motivation and development as a character. He takes on the memories of Zack and incorporates it into his own character, and as a result, he loses his own identity. This created mystery around Cloud's character. There was a part in the game where Cloud recounts the story of Sephiroth and the massacre of Nibelheim. At this point of the game, Cloud retells the story as he remembers it, and players believe and hangs on to every word he says. The only person that doesn't really believe Cloud is Tifa, because as she remembered from the events in her own experience, Cloud was never there to begin with, so she thought. What the developer successfully accomplished was distrust between the players and Cloud himself, because Cloud's story doesn't add up. That's because he is recounting the story through Zack's eyes instead of his own. Sephiroth was able to use this to his advantage to manipulate Cloud into giving him the black materia in order to revive himself. Everything Cloud thought he knew about himself weren't truly his own identity, so you as a player had to help Cloud piece his identity back together again. That was one of the core elements to the original story. But if the remake decides to change it by keeping Zack alive, that would completely destroy who Cloud is as a character, and I pray that they don't go down this path in later installments of this remake. Now, I see that some fans of the original who are such a big fan of Zack that they are willing to sacrifice that part of the story just to be able to potentially play as Zack or see a happy ending for him. What I am about to say will probably piss off some people. But I'm going to be honest, Final Fantasy Crisis Core was not a good game to me story-wise. What I loved most about Zack was the mystery behind the character. We only knew what the developers wanted to tell us about him. Zack was only an instrument for Cloud character growth and development. The mystery behind Zack made him bigger than life. By basing the game around Zack and giving him a full backstory, destroyed that mystery around the character. The Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core tone felt more like an anime than an actual Final Fantasy game. In my opinion, Final Fantasy isn't an anime in tone. It has its own feel to it. Crisis Core added elements and retconned certain aspects of the original Final Fantasy lore, and it just ruined Final Fantasy VII for me. So please, don't ruin Zack by throwing in elements that's unnecessary to the game's main lore. Next is Arif's sacrifice. Her death was a motivating factor behind not only Cloud's character, but the entire party's character growth. That's the result of death, but her death and sacrifice was necessary for the planet and the white materia known as Holy. It was needed to protect the planet from Meteor. I've seen plenty of comments on various videos saying that it would be nice and they would love to see Arif stay alive and for Zack to reunite with her so they can be happy together, but that destroys the theme of loss. What I love most about the original game is the fact is that the game wasn't afraid to go down that dark path by killing off characters that you grew such an attachment to. I was in 4th grade when the original game released, and I remember when Sephiroth killed her. I thought it was all a bluff. I didn't believe that the developers would kill such an essential character. But after the Genova boss battle, I witnessed Cloud dropping her body into the water, and I said to myself, oh snap, she's actually dead. Literal tears ran down my eyes back then. Arif was gone, and she wasn't coming back. I spent the whole game hoping the story would turn things around and would bring her back, but it didn't happen. I was upset, but in the end, I appreciated it because it taught me a lesson. Life doesn't necessarily lead to a happy ending. Some losses will occur in your life and there's nothing you can do to change it. All you can do is endure and learn to move forward from it. I can relate this to my personal life. 3 important people who I love so much died and I had to cope with it. My cousin Ron, who passed away in a motorcycle accident, my best friend Anastasia, who died during a scuba diving expedition, and my grandmother, who passed away from organ failure. If I had the ability to go back in time like Flash and change certain events from happening, I would definitely prevent those 3 from dying. But what would that do? How would that change me as a person if these 3 individuals live? Arif said it herself in the remake. Changing what's supposed to happen will change events around you, including yourself as a person. Would I have been the same MugenLord if these 3 important people in my life were prevented from dying? How would my life choices change in a reality where they still exist? This remake may be hinting that this game's story may change drastically from the original. The remake brings Biggs and Wedge back to life. No consequences was felt when the developers are setting up a plot element that allows Cloud and the others to defy what's supposed to happen in the original game. Why would anybody want this? Last but not least, the man Sephiroth himself. I was already in doubt when they revealed that Sephiroth will be shown in the first entry of the remake, which doesn't make sense at all. Mentions of Sephiroth was only really present till after the escape of Midgard. The only thing we known about Sephiroth was the fact is that he was a war hero who died in an incident, which we find out later was a lie and a cover-up by Shinra. I know some people will say, well, we already know who Sephiroth is, but that doesn't matter. New players wouldn't know, and expanding on the lore with new information for original fans would still be a fresh experience for everyone. I literally rolled my eyes when Cloud sees Sephiroth and shouts out, "I killed you." This line changes everything. This tells us that Cloud still retains most of his memory. The mystery in the original left us clueless about Sephiroth's death. We were told he died in an incident, but we didn't know how he died or who killed him. Cloud himself didn't even know that he killed him, because Cloud and Zack's memories were jumbled together and what he thought was true was actually false. So what does this mean for the hotel sequence where Cloud tells the story of Sephiroth and the Nibelheim massacre, if that even ever happens in the follow-up to the remake of this game? There are so many questions moving forward, but this has definitely completely changed my enthusiasm for the future of the remake, and it really disappointed me. And I don't know how to feel. I don't know what to think. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. For those of you guys who experienced it and played the game, what do you think about the ending? Do you think the ending really turns you off, or do you think that you're willing to take that chance and see where this game is going to lead us? Because at this point, to me, I feel as though that this game is no longer Final Fantasy VII. This is a completely different game, just utilizing the Final Fantasy VII characters. And I think, to me, it kind of robs even the newer fans, because I wanted to go down that path. I wanted to share that experience with my brother Keo Lancer and DX Wright, because they haven't really played Final Fantasy VII, the original one, and it would have just been so much fun for me to just experience it with them and just smiling like, yo, this is what happened in the game, and these guys are going through it, but they've seen it in a different visual art style with voice acting and just a new coat of paint over it, and that just would have been awesome. But I feel as though that new fans are getting gypped out of that original experience as well. So definitely want to hear your thoughts. If you like the video, as I mentioned before, please subscribe. It helps me in the algorithm. And if you want to be notified for more news related to Final Fantasy VII Remake, or just anything Square Enix related in the near future, that about wraps it up. This is MugenLord signing off. See you Game Fiends later. Peace out. It looks like you reached the end of the video. Well, while you're at it, check out some of my other discussion videos by clicking on the annotations below, and don't forget to follow me on other social media platforms to stay up to date with future content. Signing off.